Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm just recording a quick episode. I wanted to talk about writing and how I create characters and if there's a value to that. There's something incredible in life where when a person gets tired of their self, others, or world, before they in some sense retaliate or revolt or any of that, right? The person begins to wonder what else there could be, you know? And so this episode is intended for all those what if people, those people who just, realize that life is not just like one way of looking at things. Everything can be looked at from multiple ways. And this is why Mr. Within is saying we're multidimensional beings. So, I don't have my other laptop here with the notepad, but I guess I'll take notes for myself from the talk I haven't given yet. So there's two ideas. One, I was like, yo, it's a cool idea. Let me bring it up to the species, report back to the species, to the global tribe, that all, in some sense, the experience of fiction, is starting from non-fiction. So we have an example of a creature that is real. So non-fiction is reality. And then we know that there is writers in real life, and then these writers create abstract stories, right? So for example, science fiction writers, fantasy writers, right? So I'm starting off with the observation that fiction, like imagine somebody said, where did fiction come from? We're like, yo, there's something called non-fiction, which is reality. And so fiction was in some sense added to reality. And this is the bizarre thing, because we say, okay, so, non-fiction is a being that is real, and then fiction is created by a being that is real. So it's as if fiction is unreal. So it's as if we're saying a real being created something, a real being created something unreal, and then this real being is treating its own creation as in some sense not real. So imagine, there's a couple, right? They have a child, right? And then their child's like, Mom, Dad, I'm hungry. And imagine the parents are like, yo, you're not real, you're abstract, do you know? And the child's like, no, I'm pretty sure I'm real, I'm hungry, you know? So what I'm saying is, this is something weird that the human species is doing. It is treating itself as real, but it's treating what it creates as unreal. because we cannot ignore how imagination is like something that we receive when the brain happens. So this leads to two implications, okay? It implies that either fiction is as real as non-fiction, because because the origin of fiction is from non-fiction. So it's kind of like we're saying, like, here's the weird thing, we're saying like fiction is unreal, but it's like it was created by non-fiction. So non-fiction created something that is, it's like something real created something unreal, right? And then we're saying, wait a minute though, how could that be unreal when when it started from a real force? Right? The way human beings are treating their minds, it's like something's happening, but because we don't understand it, people are saying, yo, just call it imagination and ignore it. Just think you're not a creative person and never wonder about the mind and the potential and the ability of an unknown species in an unknown world. You know, what's fascinating to me is that we don't let other people dress us. Like when a young child, sure, a young child or like a old trillionaire, right? Maybe like somebody comes and dresses them, okay? So we don't let other entities come and dress us. But what's fascinating to me is that human beings let other entities come and dress their minds. For me, that's what I realized the cultural conditioning was, you know? Terence McKenna really pointed at it, and I looked at where he pointed. There are no teachers, there are no students. The whole reality of the teaching is that it's an exploration. We are here to be explorers. You know, that's it. Parents all around the world want to know how to raise their kids. Let me tell you this, if you can raise a human being, you know, from nothing to be fascinated by everything, you're victorious. Because the biggest problem is that indirect ideology is replacing that desire within the human being to actually go experience. Right? So we are literally a species that is converting our experience into artificial expansion, and we think we're making progress, but the saints and sages are horrified. You know, they're horrified but not hopeless. There's a story, a very beautiful story I had heard. It's a Zen story, and the story goes that there's this, like, you know, old Zen monk, Zen master. This old wise man, he goes into the forest, he sits down, and he cultivates such a level of inner peace, being at peace with the world, that not only animals come around him, but disciples begin showing up around him. And so this guy suddenly realizes that he has like 500 disciples, and this is back in the day, the story. And so out of one of these disciples, there was one disciple this master, Zen master, was fond of, that in some sense they called him the smiling disciple. And it was weird because this guy was smiling all the time. And even people would go up to the smiling disciple and be like, yo man, did you smile like this as a kid? Like, what's wrong with you? How can you smile at everything? And the guy, how could you smile all the time? And the smiling disciple would silently just be there, just smile, you know. Anyways, this time at winter is about to come, and there's this king of the land, and the king of the land has so many problems, like with his council, and then his wives, in some sense, trying to forward their princes and all of this, you know. So the king's like, yo man, let me get this wise guy here. Maybe he can help me. Which was actually a wise choice by the king. Okay. Because most kings don't feel they feel they don't need help. You know, that's the illusion of power. The illusion of power is you think this world is designed to function alone, and no, it's not. And it takes a while to like appreciate how really it's a blessing that it's not designed for us to function through it alone. You know. Anyways. So the king says, yo, bring these holy men freezing in the forest into my kingdom. You know, give them good food and all of this. Right? And so they give it like this, and the sage comes with all his disciples, like 500 disciples. And in that moment, right, the king goes up and, like, I don't know, shakes the hand, and the Zen master bows or something, you know. And the king says, I'm very busy, but, you know, stay here for the winter, and, like, you know, and I've told my guards to protect you guys and give you anything, and I honor truth more than, you know, my own kingdom, you know, something like that. And the wise man's like, all right, man, I'm just some dude in a forest who just meditated, relax. I'm not one of those temple monks, you know what I mean? So anyways, what happens is the king goes, but the king is so busy that winter passes and the monks are about to leave, and suddenly the king is like, oh my God, I forgot about the monks, you know? And the king runs before all the monks are leaving, right? And the king comes to the Zen master, who's like this old guy. And he says, the first old guy who sat in the forest, and he says, listen, man, you're pretty old. I'm an unwise, foolish, you know, I'm a foolish king, you know, and your disciples are young people, and in some sense, I feel there's, one of them has learned enough for them to be like the next guru, and you can come and be my advisor in the kingdom, and you'll live like the best life. And this old guy was like, yeah, I'm pretty fucking old. All right, man. And he's like, okay. And this man goes to the smiling disciple where he was fond of. And he's like, I have cultivated enough my inner peace. And now the world is calling me for a different journey. You are the next guru. Go guru it up, son. You know? And the smiling disciple smiles, you know. And, you know, I don't know, he like shows respect to his, you know, Zen master. And the disciples all go into the forest. And as the stories go, the years pass, the old Zen master provides counsel to the king. And at the same time, you know, the smiling disciple goes, and everybody begins, like all those people go in the forest, and their inner peace increases. Just an expansion of inner peace, just an expansion of human beings being happy being in the world they're in, you know. You know, why do you think all the religions are like, yo, be grateful, goddammit, be humble? Because if you're not, how else would you be able to appreciate the majesty of a world that is beyond your couple pound, you know, a brain that's just, you know, like a lightning storm in a jar? It's like, are we limiting reality to a lightning storm in a jar? Like, somebody tell me, you know? And even Thor's like, yo, Mr.Within's got a point, you know? Oh man. So take this in. Something real created the unreal. So the unreal is meaningful only to the real. That means you can't know the illusion exists if you don't have a contrast of truth. Do you understand? But human beings are like, yo, truth is beyond human understanding. That's why we call it like divine truth, right? So what do we do? Truth is beyond us, do you know? And this is where man has to understand. Every being you see in this world, I'm speaking as a soul right now, not as my personality to the viewers, okay? Every being you see in this world, the reason they take shape is because of their distance to God. So imagine you had a GPS, there was this divine GPS, and this divine GPS would show you, like in meters, for example, how far away you are from a point. Okay? So now imagine that point is the original point of manifestation, and you want to know how many meters distance, like, are you far from the truth? Are you away from the truth? Okay, so that GPS, instead of showing you meters, it shows you manifestation. Your existence is showing you your distance from truth. It's like if somebody was like, yo, in the future, are they gonna create a divinometer, or are they gonna create a sacredometer? Do you know? And people are like, yo, Mr. Within, what is that? You know, and it's like, yo, man, you go to the temple and you throw this like spherical drone into the whole temple. The spherical drone scans something, I don't know, scans for, like, in quotations, purity energy, you know, and gives you like, yo, nobody has been angry in this building for the last 2 months. You know, like it's like pure temple space. You know what people don't realize. You know, something that I've dedicated my life to. That means at some point I was like, yo, man, if I had another lifetime in the future, in what way would I remember this lifetime? Like, who was I in this lifetime? You know, can you imagine somebody like in their past life, yo, man, I was a king, I was an emperor, oh my God, I was a ninja, oh my God, I was like, I don't know, a writer, an enlightened guy, I don't know, something, do you know? Casanova, do you know? Running on the rooftops of Venice, do you know? And I realized that what I have been doing from the beginning of my life to now is making decisions which is equivalent to, in some sense, my consciousness rewriting the sensory perception it receives as itself. Dear viewers, the world is way more mysterious than our teachers could have taught us. And I think they were either scared, ignorant, or I shouldn't say scared. They were either scared or clueless, or robots, you know. Somebody was using the term worker drones, and I was like, oh my God, Star Wars. Star Wars is like so culturally, socially, you know. And let me tell you, an advanced civilization means we have to revalue the human experience in every moment. Let me tell you what an advanced civilization would look like. That's pretty much the symbolism of the banner of Mr.Within. An advanced civilization would be a civilization that has just accepted, for the first time ever in history, that we should value every being based on their most advanced potential. That is the great shift. In the subtitle, I've written considering karma in fictional character design, and then mysteries behind the writer's eyes. So I was thinking, like, I don't have kids, but I was thinking, like, if I had kids, and one of them was like, "Yo, how do I become like, you know, the best writer or the greatest writer in the world, something like that?" I would be like, "Son, first of all, snap out of the reality that there is such a thing as the greatest writer in the world. And first begin considering that greatness is not individual, greatness is collective. You think I'm here wasting my time, thinking that the species is not great? What writing is literally world revelation. When a person writes, they are trusting their mind. When a person speaks, they're trusting their mind. When a person moves, they're trusting their mind. And what's fascinating is that somebody could have incredible trust when it comes to movement, right? Like a person can walk without thinking about it, And then there's somebody who goes on stage and is about to give a talk in front of like millions of people, And then that person's like, "Oh my God, who am I? Am I worthy? Is the sun shining today? What's going on?" So I will share with the viewers how I got into writing. In 2011, I remember I had seen the show Californication. And this show Californication, I don't know that it was like I was like my naive, like youthful mind saw that show and was like, "Yo, that's so cool." you know? And I don't know, there was something about that archetype that made writing very cool, because then I researched the show and I realized the whole show was based on in some sense, Charles Bukowski, this legendary writer of American, technically genre low life realism. So what does this mean? This means that I suddenly saw the value that what writing was as if it was a human being who had suddenly taken a slice of the world and so deeply looked at it that they had uncovered a mystery of it. They had found something glowing that nobody else had. Do you see? And it's very difficult to trust the new. You know why? Because the past may not authorize it. Do you understand? There has been times in my moment, the tree of knowledge has branched into the past and the future. When I think about who I was in the past, I see that I was a stumbling entity. I see that I was someone who had not trusted reality. And so, guys, let me tell you, I had the most saddest experience. 2011 and 2012 was the worst new year of my life. I literally declared it. Just I was so alone, and it was like such, I intoxicated myself and was like roaming the streets of Toronto, and it was one of those situations where it was as if it was a new year, but I had felt a sort of universal failure. But anyways, let me relate this to writing. This is the reason I'm sharing it. In 2000, I think it was like end of 10, 11. What had happened was that I remember I had seen the show again, Californication, and I had also heard this ridiculous quote from Ernest Hemingway, I think, which was like, write drunk, edit sober. And I remember I was visiting my cousins in London, and I was like in there, I was, at my cousin's place, and I was just drinking, and I had this iPad, and I was writing this poem called The Dark Horse. I don't know, in my mind, I thought it was like I was doing something, right? And I remember I wrote like the saddest, most depressing, like just a few lines. And then after those few lines, I couldn't write anything. And I realized I'm just becoming drunk. Do you know what I'm saying? And so there was no inspiration. It was as if that my soul had nothing to say because it had seen nothing yet. And so I remember at that point, I decided to let go of writing. But then something bizarre happened, And I remember there was a time where I was sitting by this fountain, and this was in York University. And what it was for a second, I was just there, and I noticed that there was a thought stream moving faster than my own thinking. That means I know the speed that I think. And for a second, I noticed every time I exhale, when I close my eyes, I can notice literally thoughts move faster than I actually think. So it was as if I was experiencing a different mind in my own mind. It was very weird. A different speed of eventhood of a different mind, And so I remember I sat there, and with every exhalation, I remember I just heard this very deep explanation and deep conversation. I just noticed the thought stream, and I was like, I was watching it, and it was just happening. I remember it was as if, to me, I felt like it was like something very, like, what was it? Like maybe 20 minutes, but it was like a long time had passed. So my experience of just listening to that thought stream moving faster than my own way, I think, it changed my experience of time. I went home, that thought stream at the end told me, go see page 85 of this book I had never opened. I had bought, but I had never opened on the shelf. I go open that exact page, and on that page was exactly what was said, literally, I was hearing in the fountain through my exhalations. In my inner realms, I was pretty much noticing a thought stream in my mind, inner realm. And if somebody's like, Mr.Within, what do you mean inner realm? I'm saying, imagine literally your imagination is an invisible art studio overlaid upon physical reality, but it's invisible. Okay, your mind, imagine, is an invisible coating over reality. Okay, so this invisible layer has freedoms and permissions that the outer realm doesn't. And somebody's going to be like, what do you mean? I'll be like, I'll tell you exactly. How do you think the concept of Superman was created? How do you think the Wright brothers created the airplane? How do you think every invention was ever made? In the mind, something that was impossible in the outer realms was seen possible, and then through a mysterious, divine, coincidental effort and dedication, the inventor brought it out from the from the inner realms. Do you know? As a man, childbirth is something I'll never understand, but the closest thing I've come up to it is in inventing, creating. Do you understand? It's a force. Everything in this life is a force. Our society, our educational systems, our cultures, they raise us as nouns, but the world is they raise us as known nouns, but the world is an unknown verb. And that's where the true life begins. The mysteries behind the writer's eyes are how far the world has gifted the writer with exposure. What that means is somebody, when they're young, they might not understand what's happening. But if the person takes an approach that the soul is a journalist, imagine your soul, the soul of human beings, has a sort of journalistic tendency. It wants to know the truth about what is going on. about what is happening and what is truth. You see, the species, like, people don't understand. They, there was a time I thought the internet came too soon for our species. But then I realized it's like, whether it came too soon or not, now what is the tactical advantage? The tactical advance is global networking, the tactical advantage. Yo, there's this hilarious thing. I was thinking of this story, just this hypothetical story. Imagine there was some intellectual pundit in the past, right? And this intellectual pundit was like, yo, I will figure out what God is doing here. I will figure out what it is, what's happening here, right? And then suddenly, this intellectual pundit had, let's say, a sibling, and that sibling was always playful, simple, happy, And the intellectual pundit was in some sense like, yo, how can you be happy when you don't know why everything is happening? And the sibling would say, in some sense, yo, it's just happening. At least it's just happening, something's happening. And so the intellectual pundit went and suddenly found some sort of sacred technological way to contact the divine. And then the divine appeared. The divine appeared and the pundit said, yo, God, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? Why is the world happening? And then God responded to the pundit, yo, are you telling me I can't dance? And the pundit was in shock. Anyways, so guys, this is a quick episode. I guess I'll wrap it up. For me, it was something where I looked for, failed, didn't look for, then it found me, then it wasn't success, like a sort of the idea of success changed, and more it was the cultivation of rhythms of awareness. You see, it's as if at some point you have to look at this life and be like, yo, what am I? If you're a physical being, then a physical strategy is enough. But if you think you're a non-physical being, for example, if you think you're just your body, then, just take care of that. If you think you're a mind, then the purpose of a mind in a world may be different than the purpose of a body in a world. So I was thinking, what does this mean? How can we somehow kind of give this, organize this? And I was like, let's say that there's a visible dimension where we see objects. There's an invisible dimension where we envision subjects in films, like inner films, imagination and memory and whatnot, right? So there's a visible dimension, visible objective dimension, okay? So there's a visible dimension, then there's an invisible dimension, then there's an inconceivable dimension, okay? Now the visible dimension, we're saying that's knowledge, that's known, okay? The inconceivable dimension is 100% unknown, and the invisible dimension is semi-known, semi-unknown. So what this means is, if you think you're a body, you have 100% access to the known. If you think you're a mind, you have 50% access to the known and 50% access to the unknown. If you think you're a soul in the inconceivable dimension, you have 100% access to the unknown. Do you see what I'm saying? You know, it's as if there, if you, and think of it this way, there's different types of fashion to this. So the fashion of the body, we have like the physical fashion industry and whatever. Then we have the fashion of the mind, which is in some sense all the systems like psychology, philosophy, let's say even theoretical science. And then we have in some sense the fashion of the soul. But the whole idea of the soul is that the soul is completely naked. It's completely attributeless. It is shapeless. So let me see, what else can I say? Okay, considering karma and character fictional design. So what do I mean by this? Okay, I don't know if anybody has done this. You know, some people may not care, but for me, like a hobby is to, for me, like imagine, like I would consider myself a story hunter. Okay, what that means is I look at an unknown world and I wonder about how it is being compartmentalized subjectively. What that means is a story is how reality is contained ideologically. Okay. A story means a real event has become an abstract idea, an abstract concept. So, when it comes to character design, I guess I'll say this. First of all, I've written a lot of science fiction, and in those science fiction universes, I was like, okay, pretty much, okay, so even through my experience in film school and whatnot, I'll tell you the whole idea is that when it comes to filmmaking, there's something called a cinematic language. Okay, and the cinematic language is how the director is using his IQ to, in some sense, choose and select what it wants to reveal out of this expansive story. Right, you might be a director and you get a story, that a film that you love, and your mind is seeing, like, let's say 3 versions that you can create like one scene. Okay, but you have to ultimately make a decision. Do you know? Think about it. Back in the day, people unconsciously moved. That means they had no choice. Now we can consciously move. That means we have some choice. So, something I realize as just someone who, see, when you look at human psychology, there's the idea of karma. Karma means cause and effect. It means the effect you're experiencing, it's something you also cause, right? So karma is another way of saying an entity is starting to become responsible for itself, for its origin. I'll give you an example. Young children are not responsible for their karma. They don't understand karma. Do you know? That means they're just this effect, and they're not trying to be being responsible for how they're being a causal position in the moment, right? But then you reach a certain point in this lifetime where you become responsible for your causal position as a being. And you know, life is so fascinating because regardless of whatever emotional attachment you have, because it ends, everybody's like, yo, should everybody, run towards their own free for all? You know what I mean? Should everybody just follow their dreams, or should we take care of each other? Or like, like the species has to network and start having conversations on how do we actually build an advanced civilization in all the schools, right? Like, let me tell you this, I'm just wishing in the future, imagine children, in like, let's say, middle schools in the future, right? There's like teachers in the yards just watching over the kids, and then the teachers suddenly see all the kids have sat down on the grass, and one by one each student comes up and gives a speech. Do you know? And then in some sense, the teacher's like, yo, what are you kids doing? You don't want to play on the playgrounds and all of this and whatnot, right? It's like, why aren't you kids like playing around? And the kids are like, no, all the kids on this playground have decided to, in some sense, start sharing ideas on how we can advance the world and make it a better place, And the teacher, imagine, gets shocked, you know? That means the responsibility level of the human being for its causal position is increasing. Now, most human beings are responsible for their individual causal position. Now, I was like, yo, that's so like something like just naturally there, but something that seems to be we have to choose is to, in some sense, do we want to be responsible for our species? Do you understand what that means? That means, imagine they said Earth was being invaded, okay, and half the population and imagine these benevolent aliens came down and they're like, yo, we can take you guys off your planet and let these evil aliens come and destroy your planet, like come and take over, like instead of coming and invading you, we can take you guys to our own planet and defend you. And imagine half the human species got on the ships of those aliens, right? And then if I was in that situation, I would be like, no, I'm staying behind. And people would be like, why? Do you know? And I would be, in some sense, it's because if we don't care for what is human, how could we have ever been human? There's a quote from Sadi, this Iranian poet, Persian poet. This quote is so powerful. Sadi says, human beings are members of a whole, in creation of one essence and soul. If one member is afflicted with pain, other members uneasy will remain. If you have no sympathy for human pain, the name of human you cannot retain. We are in this world not to just be like, yo, I'm spiritual and I'm getting out of here. I'm transcending out of this suffering. No, 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 no. We are here to be human. That is the great work in the void of this universal sector. This is the great vehicle. And there was a time where every person I've met from the beginning of my life till now, I thought I know them. And then I realized, no, it's like an army of elemental biological entities on a rock in the middle of nowhere. But these biological entities, their bodies are like Iron Man suits. But it's like there's multiple Iron Man suits, and it's weird. So what it means is that the biological body, the biological system is an Iron Man suit. And then excuse me, I'll say it this way. The biological system is an Iron Man suit for the world. Then the cognitive system is an Iron Man suit for the, or say, I'll say it differently, sorry. The biological system is an Iron Man suit for the cognitive system. And then the world system is an Iron Man suit for the biological system. Do you understand what I'm saying? I'm pretty much saying that your ego is like inside your body, and your body is inside a world. But what is strange is that evolution has turned an object into a subject to itself. Somebody in the chat section says, we know what we know about what we don't know. And then there is everything else beyond that. When we know about that, does that expand our range of knowingness? I think the idea should be that if you want to expand your range of knowingness, it's infinite. You know why? Because in the middle of nowhere, we named everything. Knowledge is man-made, but existence is not. That's the clue. So what I'm trying to say is that if somebody's saying, yo, am I trying to become aware of the unknown so I can expand my knowledge? No, that's not the framework I'm sharing. I'm saying in your attempt to expand your knowledge, you will realize the unknown is so big that the attempts of the known small is infinite. So once you realize the expansion of knowledge is infinite, then for the first time you realize knowledge has no end. All those people who think this world is a school, they think they're going to graduate from this world. This world, the school has no end. The void has no end for entities of shape. So you must in this life try to wonder if you're truly like acting like a spiritual person of mystical insight. You know, there was a time where scientists would look at spiritual people and be like, yo man, what is this woo-woo, And the person would be like, thank you man, thank you, woo-woo, that's the highest honor. It's like that honor is too high. I can't even accept the honor of woo. Imagine somebody says, yo, that's woo-woo, and suddenly, this Chinese guy gets up. It's like, excuse me, don't you dare bring me into this. Yeah. Man, Chinese culture is so awesome. Something that the world, every person in China has to know. Every person, in the nation of, how can I tell you this? That the world has been raised on Kung Fu movies. The whole world. Generations of people have been raised. I can't tell you how much, Kung Fu was, and action movies were, part of my childhood. So guys, keep in mind, this episode I'm trying to talk about how to be a writer, but really it applies to everything, right? So what I'm saying is when you sit down to write a story, you got to first look at what kind of mind you have, how your imagination works, and what kind of content you have to work with, okay? So one approach is some people sit down with a piece of paper and they're like, yo, I'm gonna write the best story, right? And they start off with a huge expectation of what they have to do, and then when they can't follow up on the expectation on time, then they're like, yo man, I'm not a good writer, right? But the attitude should be that you're not a good writer. You have no clue what kind of a writer you are. You're just trying to see that if you were a writer, if you were to write a book, what kind of content was your mind giving you? What do you see? What have you seen? And then they say there's some people who speak because they want to say, who want to say something, and some people speak because they have something to say, right? So what really speech and communication is where language is pointing, okay? And why do you think they call religious book like revelation? Why do you think they call these books a message? What is a message? A message is a finger pointing to the stars, poetically. So anyways, what I'm saying is, So when it comes to, you got to wonder about the karma of the character. And in my experience of, for example, science fiction, in this book, in this early science fiction story I wrote called The Messenger of Giants, it's unpublished, it's on the way. In the year 5025, right, I had created this concept where there were beings in the, so I was thinking of like what kind of beings, what kind of world should I create, and then I was like a world of total freedom. So I was like in the futurists and the traditionalists. The traditionalists are all those beings that are still in time. They're considering to be creatures of time. The futurists are all those beings who believe they're beyond time. So androids are futurists. Some aliens are futurists. Invisible collective clouds or collective beings are futurists, for example. It's like very cool, but just it's cool to just create a character in the world and to be like, yo, imagine I create a character and this character punches someone in the face. And then what kind of karma would you have to create? So when you create like science fiction, or when you write a story, you're not just creating a character in a world. That's like the noun version. The verb version is you create the character. You create the character's decision, and you also are responsible to create that character's karma. And it's so insightful when you do that. Because then for your first time, your mind, if you create a character that's like yourself, and then you begin wondering if this character in the story makes decisions, what kind of karma it would have, pretty much it means that from like this third person point of view, it's like from outside of time, we're creating how a universe of time will interact with a character in time. So writing is fascinating. Writing is like, if you want a mirror for your body, go like, or if you want to see your body, you go look in a mirror. If you want to see your mind is not a noun, it's a verb. And so the way a verb works is that it's cinematic. Like for me, my imagination, it gives me like film snippets. And I'm like, yo, what did I just see? And I go write it down. And then the next day I see something else, and then I try to connect the dots. And in the dots I use my like designer problem solving approach. So wonder about your it's like once you get fascinated and you realize this world is so unknown, then knowledge doesn't become a have to enforcement in a certain way. You find freedom because you're no longer just the eagle on the branch. You're also that eagle that flew into the sky, saw the whole forest, and came down. And then you wrote a book. And then people were like, good job, slow hand clap. Anyways, guys, thanks for listening. Much blessings and namaste. Rise back up.